Right now, you see the pride of Hampton County, the great Alex Jones. Hey, man.
How y'all doing?
All right, what's the deal with Wendell Gregory? I know you've been chatting with him. What's he telling you?
Yeah, that was kind of a surprise when that news came along. He was one that I was kind of interested to see this year, being that it was going to be his second full year at that edge position after moving from linebacker, and I was kind of eager to see, especially this spring, how he do when Jalen Brown went down and won't be back for the spring. So I thought maybe he'd have a little bit more reps, but now he plans in the portal.
Well, in due time we'll find out. What the deal was, or maybe we won't. I don't know, but I guess it is safe to say this: you can expect this pretty much every year when it comes to the transfer portal. The curious question is why now? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Not even halfway through spring practice. Why now? But we don't have those answers, Alex. So we'll just go off of what we do know. What do you know about? I know you're out there this morning watching them. Thanks to Coach Beamer for letting that run a little bit longer than I think it was scheduled to. What was it, 6 periods or so that you got to get some eyeballs on the football team? What stood out?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, just from a injury standpoint, Mike Smith was one that he's been out, and it sounds like he will be out the rest of the spring. But he was still out there. Saw him do some light jogging at one point, doing some stuff off to the side with Chip Moore, and so that was good to see. That it doesn't seem like it's maybe too serious with him, but just maybe just kind of cleaning some things up. But you got to see a little bit of maybe a hint at the depth chart with the offensive line. I think it. With the 5 that were out there, I think it was not too much of a surprise with, they're doing some one-on-one type drills within their position group. And it was Josiah at left tackle. Then you had Boaz Stanley at center. Then you had Tree at left guard, Boaz at center. Then you had Trevon at right and at right guard and Casey Henry at right tackle. And I think with the injury to Nick Sharp, like before the injury, I may have even would have penciled in Trevon Ball as that potential right guard, just because I think he could be in for a big year. Just kind of building off what he was able to learn last year, but I don't think it was too much of a surprise now, obviously, with Nick Sharp being down, that Trevon Ball was doing a little bit of work, potentially what it looked like today with that first group.
Well, how close is the second group to that first group?
Yeah, I think we talk about a lot with the depth chart. Like they've built that room solidly with what they've been able to do in recruiting, both portal wise and in the high school ranks. And guys like Marquis Anderson, who's finally, he's finally healthy. He struggled with injuries his first 2 years, and he's getting a little bit of work at center as well as just kind of a backup option. Just because with Ryan Brubaker, who's been their backup center, being down, Marquis can get a little bit of work in there at center, but he's a guy who could slide into one of those guard spots. You still got Rodney Newsom as well, who could do a little bit of work at center of those guard spots. So, and Jatavius Shivers is one too with these tackle spots at right tackle. We actually got to talk to him yesterday, and when he came in for that Alabama game, when Casey Henry went down, I was pretty impressed with what he was able to do. I mean, that was a really good defensive line he was going up against at Alabama, and I thought he held his own. So we talk about a lot just the depth that, Lonnie Teasy and those guys have built, and I think you're starting to see it a little bit. There's a lot of different options they can go with.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at it one of two ways, I guess, right, Alex? If you feel like you've got your starting 5 in April, which I agree, I think those are your starting 5 right now. You can look at it and say, well, maybe those guys are pretty good. And then you can also look at it and say, because we haven't seen it, well, why do we know in April that these are just this is it? What's everybody else doing? I mean, you pointed it out. I mean, they've signed some big Cam Pringle, and you mentioned Shivers. I mean, there's a bunch of guys that they have signed, but those names don't seem to be popping up as much.
I think they're rotating a lot as well. Like the thing that we got to see what they were doing is just more like a one-on-one, but they lined it up as like what the starting 5 kind of would look like. And so, but I think Lonnie Teasley mentioned it. I think earlier this week when we talked to him, they're going to do a lot of rotating in the spring, and I think that's just kind of finding who's the right 5. And then once you get into that summer, then into preseason camp, then you want to get that consistency down and start building that chemistry. And you saw that last year. I remember last year that first preseason practice, or one of the first ones. We saw some team stuff that starting offensive line that was the starting 5 the whole year was really consistent through preseason camp, and there wasn't any movement. But right now they're going to continue mixing in those guys, but I just think right now, if I had to project where a starting 5 would be for that line as we stand here today, that would be the 5 that I would have wrote in there.
There's no question about it, and the coaching staff, regardless of what anybody like us says, sure as hell aren't going to come out and say, "Yeah, these are the 5." Yeah. The rest of y'all, don't worry about it. Y'all are all going to be backups. That's not how that's going to work. as we all well know. My understanding behind Lenore's Sellers is that the quarterback room is tight. I know that Aaron Nolan has come in and brought some athleticism to the room, looks really good, but man, source I've got says don't count these other guys out. Cutter Woods is doing some great stuff, and Dante Reno is doing some great stuff. None of them near as developed as Lenore's, as we all well know. But certainly those three are working neck and neck and doing some good things.
Yeah, Shane Beamer said on this week when we talked to him that they don't have a number 2 quarterback right now. And, I think, probably a lot of people thought that Aaron Nolan's going to come in and be that number 2 guy right away. And he may still end up being, because I've heard good things about him as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, Shane himself said that Aaron led a 16 or like a 19 play drive the other day in practice. And so he's done good. I've heard good things, and I've heard good things about Cutter Woods as well. I mean, we knew what he can do. And I mean, we know how he can throw the ball, but, Shane kind of talked about the other day too, that he's a winner. I mean, he's a guy that you've seen what he can do in high school at Westside. And, I think it's a real competition going in there. And it sounds like Dante Reno has also, taken that step from year 1 to year 2. And, I mean, you're going to continue to need competition. And that competition is also going to help push Lenore's too. Because, I mean, even, obviously Lenore's is a starter, but you want that competition to continue pushing him and making him better. So I think kind of all parties in there are making each other better. And then don't forget Luke Doty as well. I mean, he's been dressed as a quarterback when we've been out there today. And, he was working the quarterback today again, too. He was throwing some routes for those guys. And I think a lot of that kind of just comes down to experience. I mean, when you look at that quarterback room overall, it's a young room. And kind of even though Lenora Sellers in there, Lenora Sellers is still young. And behind Lenore's, there's not really a whole lot of experience at all. And Luke Doty, was going to be that starting quarterback Shane Beamer's first year before he got hurt. And I think a lot of that is just his experience and what he can bring. I mean, he knows the offense. He knows he can just kind of help bring those other guys along. But also, I mean, he can throw it too. He can play a little bit of quarterback. But they got so many different roles they can throw him in. But I don't think it's too much of a surprise right now to see him getting some work at quarterback as well.
Yeah, the Doty situation is incredibly interesting. The wide receiving core, of course, returns 4 guys that we all know about that have contributed significantly here, and then they went out and signed what is sounding like a fairly elite group of freshmen. When you put them all together, that is a group that has just got a chance to be really, really, really good. And so you wonder. Now, Luke didn't play a bunch of wide receiver last year either, although he was listed as one. He was back on kickoffs and those type things. So you do wonder, right? Is there still a place for Luke Doty in the wide receiver room? Or are they, maybe I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, and I don't think any of us know what the answer is. But because he's been in the program since 1977, they're trying to figure out a way to reward him and to be able to utilize more so than anything, along with his athletic ability, Alex, his I guess his durability and the fact that he gets it as much as anybody on that team does. Have you heard any whispers as to whether they have considered moving him full time back to quarterback?
I mean, it maybe something that they're looking at. I haven't heard anything one way or the other. I think that's still kind of like what we talked about the offensive line. There's just a lot of rotating going on right now in spring practice, trying to see where their best spots are. But Shane Beamer mentioned or talked about on just kind of Luke Doty's speed and some of the things that he did, kind of from a combine standpoint that they do before the season, tested really well in the wide receiver room. So Luke's going to be one too that he's going to do whatever the coaching staff needs him to do, whatever the team needs, and he can really fit in at that wide receiver or quarterback role. But just my opinion, I wouldn't be surprised just to see him, go to the quarterback room just because of what I mentioned earlier with that experience factor. He's going to be the most experienced of the backups. You like the potential and the ceiling of guys like, Aaron Nolan and Cutter Woods, but, Doty's going to have that experience and time on the field already.
All right. What's the defensive line doing?
Yeah, I think the question that everybody had coming to the season was defensive tackles. And, when you look at guys like Gabriel Brownlow, Dendy, Devontae Miles, they physically look really good. And I think they're still learning, the system, learning what Travian Robertson expects of them. And, Travian Robertson's shown here these first 2 years that he's been here that he's going to get pretty much the most out of those defensive linemen. And, one that I'm interested to kind of hear more about is Zay Hardy and how he's continuing to come along. I think that he can have a chance to play a big role this year. He's a guy who #1 overall JUCO recruit in the country. And he has the potential. I think it's just continue to come along on that side. And then from a portal standpoint, we'll see what they do there, because I think that's the spot that everybody's talking about that South Carolina needs to look at in the portal. I'm sure they will, just from a numbers standpoint. Then to also see they can get somebody to come in that could go along with some of those more experienced guys like a Nick Barrett or Moncal Goodwin. And, I think one of the more interesting is a lot of these guys have talked about not only in the defensive line room, but at linebacker and secondary is Nick Barrett's kind of taking on that leadership role. And I think that's huge for South Carolina because he's a guy he's been at South Carolina for a while. And I think it's his time, and he learned a lot from those guys that are ahead of him. So it's good to hear that he's taking on that leadership role because I think that room needs it with what they lost last year.
Yeah, Hardy's not an ability thing. He's got all that. All the tools are there. It's a developmental deal. He just got to campus, and I think they're trying to clean him up, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that is the case. Coming from JUCO level, I think that is a transition. It's a little bit of an easier transition just because you are a level up from high school, but now you're going into the SEC where it's a big transition to play in the SEC. So I think that's just, as you mentioned, just continue developing.
They are looking in the portal for anybody wondering. Now they're not. I mean, I don't think they're just going to take a body, but they are looking in the portal as they have been. So have no fear. Portal Beamer is here. The stepping back on the defense to the second level and that linebacking core, which is really a pretty fascinating ordeal here with the guys that they've brought in through the portal, knowing everything that they've lost or are about to lose to the NFL draft and to graduation. How much have you seen from them?
I saw a little bit of them early on from those first practices. I didn't get to see much of them today. That was a spot I wanted to look at, but didn't get to it. But one guy, Fred Johnson seems to talk about with Nick Barrett and that leadership. Ooh. They're talking about Fred Johnson being a leader now and kind of taking over in that linebacker room. And I thought when I saw him early on in those practices, I thought physically he looked like he took the next step. And he last year got those valuable reps. I think it was like Oklahoma, Kentucky game. I remember that Oklahoma game, he was wearing the green dot on his helmet, meaning Clayton White sitting there talking to him. So I think he got a chance to learn from those Demetrius Nice and Bam Martin Scott and Debo Williams. And I think he's going to be kind of that leader of the second level of that defense. And then Justin Okoronkwo is just a really impressive guy. Like, hearing him talk, and then when you go back and watch some of his film, I think he's got a chance to. If I was penciling in two starters today, I think it'd be Justin Okoronkwo and Fred Johnson. But Jerron Willis is another one to keep an eye on too. He took a big jump in his weight. I think about 254 or so, and I think he looks pretty good right now too. And South kind of could throw in a little bit of that 3-3-5 look, and they also got Sean Murphy as well, who's a experienced guy who's been in a few programs now. And so it's an intriguing room that has a lot to prove this year in the spring and preseason going into the season with what they lost, but the potential is there for sure.
It's the most athletic linebacking core they've had.
Yeah.
By far.
And then, then you throw in the freshman in there. I'm really intrigued by Donovan Darden. he was a guy who continued to rise the rankings as a high school recruit, and he's in, and I think he looks pretty good. And then you got the other guys, AJ Holloway and Tayshawn Alston as well. So, and Josh Smith as well, Dutch Fork, who's a really good player too. So it's, there's a little bit of inexperience, I guess you could say, that's in that room, but the potential of that room, I think, is really high.
Man, Josh Smith doesn't look like a freshman.
No.
The secondary with Vakari Swain not practicing right now, what does it look like?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And it was for Shane Beamer to say that he's in good standing and expect him back sooner rather than later was pretty good for South Carolina, just because with him, I think you could throw him in there as a starter at corner just with what he was able to do opposite of Judge Collier. And I think he could work himself back in there. But they have, when we've talked about before, there's a lot of different options they can go within that secondary that they've really, Torian Gray's done an incredible job building that room. And at those corner spots, I think Judge is pretty solidified as being a starter there, and he's continuing to take that next step to take over for Donald Fortune, who had a really good year. And then at that safety spot, I think you got DQ Smith, but opposite on that other spot, Nick and Warrior spot, Peyton Williams is a guy who it seems like every time he comes in the game, he makes plays. Think about that Tennessee game 2 years ago when Nick and Warrior went out. He came in and made plays. And think about the Vanderbilt game this year when DQ Smith went out with the injury in pregame warmups. He was in there and made plays. I remember that fourth down, pass breakup he had. He just seems like he always makes plays. And now I think it's just now moving into that potential starting role. And I think he could be ready for it. And, I think there's some other guys, Gerald Kilgore, Jalen Kilgore's brother, and he's, coming into his second year. And then David Busey is a guy at that safety spot to watch as well. He when you watched him on special teams last year, I think he played on just about every special teams unit, but he wasn't scared of contact. Like he come up and he made some plays on special teams. So just continue to come along in the secondary. There's all those guys like Jalewis Solomon at corner to watch as well, and Kelvin Hunter, and then we know what Jalen Kilgore can do at nickel. I mean, he's really good there. And then you throw in a guy like Brandon Cisse, who I think that you almost had to see if you can find a spot for because he may just be too good to keep off the field.
The pride of Hampton County, the beautiful, majestic, grand oaks that sway in the spring breeze. That's where he's from, Alex Jones. So they're going to scrimmage this weekend for the first time in the spring. Alex, I think it is incredibly safe to say that as opposed to this time last year, the offense is a couple of steps ahead of the defense. Would that be fair?
I think so. Just with having a guy like Norris Sellers back at quarterback and your tackles returning and some experience on the interior as well, I wouldn't be surprised at that, to see that and to hear that. And really just to add into that, the defense, some of the pieces they lost, like wouldn't be surprised to hear the offense a little farther along. But, I think that's something that I'm interested to hear is just what that defense looks like in that first scrimmage, because the run game is something I want to hear about as well, but then the run defense as well, because I think that's something that's going to be, a question into the season is how can they continue to build on what they did last year. But that's a few different areas I want to hear about, but the defense overall is something I'm interested to see where they are.
How interested are you in Dylan Stewart versus Josiah Thompson on Saturday?
That I wish we could be in there to see it, because that'd be a fun battle to watch. And I think they've had some battles in practice, but those two going up against each other are only going to make each other better. And I think Josiah was a guy who really had a pretty overall solid year, but going up against a guy like Dylan Stewart's only got to help you, because of that's probably the best edge rusher in the country. You could absolutely make an argument for that. Yeah. And it's that those two have to go up against each other a lot, I imagine, in practice, and that's only helping each other.
Yeah, if you're Josiah Thompson, when you get to August 31st, you can't be any more prepared.
Yeah.
You're facing the best. Quite frankly, all of them. Let's be fair here. They'll flip flop some things, and he'll go over there and he'll run up against Case and Henry. But if you're the tackles on this team, Thompson and Henry, who it's safe to say today they are far and away the starters at those two positions. And you're getting to face that kid every single day, not to discount Brian Thomas and Desmond Umeazulu, who I'm about to ask you about in just a second, et cetera, but specifically Dylan Stewart. You get to do this for a whole month, and then you get to do it for a whole other month in August before number one, you are going to be so happy to see Virginia Tech and anybody but Dylan Stewart coming at you. It doesn't matter who they've got. Who cares? He is going to be as much of a key to preparation for the offensive line as any coach on the staff. Just being able to combat that guy, Alex, it's just going to be incredible.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say that. I think Josiah and really those tackles are probably already ready to see somebody else other than Dylan Stewart, because that guy, he's incredible. But as I said, that's going to help each other, and really those interior guys as well, because I'm sure they have to find ways to help out on Dylan Stewart as well. So I think it helps everybody.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Have you heard anything about the offense itself? Because this will be the first scrimmage, true scrimmage under Mike Shula as he moves forward as the offensive coordinator on this team, aside from the fact that he did call plays in the bowl game, but preparing his team to run his offense. Have you heard anything about what that may look like on Saturday? I know it's early, but just how that may look.
Yeah, that's something that I think we'll learn a little bit more about or hear a lot more about after this scrimmage. I think obviously they do a lot of that 11-11 on work throughout practice, but I think you get into the stadium on Saturday, you'll really kind of get an idea of where the offense is right now. And Norris being a guy who he and Mike Shula had the chemistry already, with Mike Shula being in that spot last year, or being a key role for him last year. But that's something I'm really interested to hear after the scrimmage, just how this offense is looking, because it's a lot of pieces that they have to fill. But having a guy like Rasul Faison, who is one of the top transfer portal-backs, is going to help the run game. And those running backs too. Jawarn Howell, I think, is ready to take the next step. Is Matt Fuller ready to go? We know what Oscar Attaway can do. It's an intriguing room, and I'm interested that the run game, for one, is one of the biggest things I want to hear about.
Who's the best running back right now on this roster?
I would say Russell Faison. I
Okay.
think he's already proven what he can do, and I think Oscar Attaway. I mean, we saw in the bowl game that his potential, but Jordan Howard, like I keep bringing him up, but you see, it was against Walford and Akron, and he also had some runs in that Illinois game, but you could see his explosiveness and his speed in that game, and I think he was just continuing to adjust to the SEC level, but I think now being that he's in the year two, he can be ready to take that step, and then Matt Fuller. He's one that he was physically ready to go last year, but now is he ready to take that next step? So you'd like to have 4 to 5 running backs in that room, and I think you feel pretty good about the 4 right now.
Yeah, I think the way it was said to me, the biggest difference. I mean, Faison is a man. I mean, he's 24 years old, but the biggest difference that I've been told between him and those other guys who are really talented, they're all going to play, but who are really really talented, is from where the ball was put into their arms and the rear ends of the guys up front. You know, the decision making in that 3-4 yard gap or whatever it is right there has been a noticeable difference between Faison and everybody else in that room.
And that just comes with experience too. You mentioned Faison being an older guy. I mean, he's played a few years of college football. That's something that he's seen the kind of the live bullets in game, and Oscar Attaway has too, and Fuller to an extent as well. But that's something that just continues to come with experience.
How's Nick Harbor doing?
Yeah, it sounds like he's continued to take that next step of what they need him to do. I mean, you look at that wide receiver room. I think the freshmen, and Mike Ferry kind of talked about this as well, but those freshmen coming in are helping push him as well, because I mean, there's legit competition in that room with how athletic and how fast and just talented those freshman receivers are. But now with his full focus on spring football, like you have to imagine with the work ethic he already had with the track, with balance and track, the whole work ethic being now in football has helped him take that step. And I mean, we know he's got the potential to be the number one wide receiver. He just needs to continue taking those steps to get to that point, and it sounds like he's doing that.
Of that freshman group, is there a name that comes up more than others?
You hear about Brian Rowe a good bit. I think he's the one that you hear about he and Lex Sowers with those verticals and just the athletic ability. Like, it's crazy how athletic and just skilled that wide receiver freshman class is, and that's without Donovan Murphy being on campus. Who, I mean, that guy could be right towards the best of them all with what he can do. And when he gets into the summer, he's one that could, I think, really just kind of pick up where those guys are. And I think Jordan Gidron too. You have to talk about how impressive he is. I mean, Shane Beamer talked about yesterday how impressed he is with what he's been able to do off the field, being that he should really be a junior in high school right now, and he's out there making all A's in the classroom while going through his first spring practice. And I mean, he's a guy who's kind of a track guy, kind of a little bit taller guy with speed, and those are the ones I'm watching. And Lex Sowers too. Keep an eye on him for some special teams roles. Maybe like he did a little bit of that in high school, and you could maybe they got some options there with guys like Harbor and things like that. But I think maybe not this year, but down the line he could be a guy who not only be a problem in the wide receiver but in special teams as well.
And the most experienced of the entire group is Jared Brown, but the guys who also bring back, or I guess the next crop of guys with the most experience are all still very much in a developmental stage, further along than where they were in November, and certainly further along than where they were at the beginning of last season and last spring. But you talk about, we mentioned Nick, but I mean Mazio Bennett. I mean, obviously he gets in there as a freshman, does a bunch of really good things throughout the season last year. Vandrevius Jacobs, and we saw that you see the talent, and the transfer from Florida State is who I'm referencing here. But it's also time, and a lot of the freshmen, because they're freshmen, are always, if they're standout freshmen, they're going to get attention. We know that. We give it to them. Everybody else is going to give it to them. But the guys who generally get forgotten about are the sophomores. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, everybody always wants to talk about the old guys and the leaders in the group, and then they can't wait to talk about the young guys. And then there's always the guys who are like, well, we're here. And when you look at the wide receiving core overall, Alex, to be quite blunt, I mean, aside from the fact that Nick Harbor needs to really become a star, that's a given. The success of the group is on those guys, not necessarily the freshmen. You're hoping that they get to come up and fill in some roles, and who knows, maybe one of them earns a ton of playing time. That's great. That's maybe a little bit unexpected. But at the end of the day, if Vandrevius Jacobs and Mazio Bennett and Jared Brown aren't any good, they collectively aren't going to be any good.
Right, and it was kind of interesting hearing Mike Furry talk about this a few weeks ago when we talked to him. And with Jared Brown, I think last year he was just still learning to be that full on wide receiver, because he kind of talked about how he was a little bit of a gadget receiver at Coastal Carolina, but last year he was asked to be more of a wide receiver, and I think he was still working to figure that out. But you saw it in that, I think it was the Missouri game, where he took that screen to the house. So you see the speed that he has, and I think with him, it's just continue to kind of fine tune all of his wide receiver things, from route running to getting the high topping the ball. Like, I think that's just some things that he had to work on, and I think he's improved in that. And I think Mazio Bennett was the freshman receiver last year that everybody was talking about, and he, for the most part, lived up to that hype. He had a pretty solid freshman year. I think he finished third on the team in receiving, third among the receiver, or third or fourth in receiving, and he showed flashes. And I think he's a guy who's just extremely mature, and I think has worked to really improve in his game as well. And he's really kind of helping bring along those freshman receivers as well. So that room as a whole, I think there's just a whole lot more competition this year than there was last year. I think that's helping everybody.
All right, the ever important question: who is going to punt? Who is going to kick? Who's got the leg up right now going into the scrimmage on Saturday?
Yeah, I think I would go with Mason Love at punter. Shane Beamer kind of mentioned him and how he was doing a good job punting, and he got to learn under Kai Kroger, and he's got a big time leg as well. I mean, Kai Kroger says some really nice things about him at Pro Day, and I think he could lean there at punter. And then at kicker, I think they're still, and really each of those positions, holder and long snapper and kicker, they're still trying to figure out who the guy's going to be. And you still have the spring portal window as well. Like, maybe they saw kind of looks, because when you look at that, from a kicker standpoint, like, there's not a whole lot of experience there. And, maybe they look to the portal and see what they can find. If they can find the right fit. But you got guys like, William Joyce and Peyton Argent, and they're battling right now. And then Max Kelly, who was one of the top kickers in the country in the high school ranks, is coming in this summer. But he'll be a true freshman as well. And, maybe one of those guys are ready. And Shane talked about how they need to get into the stadium, not only this weekend for the scrimmage, but really and just put them in pressure situations, because that's what they're going to face in the SEC. So that's special teams is in a kick, and really that field goal kicker, place kicker spot is something that's interesting to watch, to see what they do from a transfer portal standpoint. If they feel like they've got one of those guys that they think they can be ready to go for Virginia Tech and on, or do they look to their portal to see what they can find?
It's something that isn't really talked about a whole lot, but you can argue that Carolina would have been in the playoffs last year had they kicked it a little bit better. And I'm not trying to place blame on anybody or anything like that. That would be incredibly wrong to do here, because kickers aren't the only players on the team. But at the same time, for a long time around here, the Gamecocks have been able to rely on whoever runs out there to kick it. It's generally going to fall through the uprights. And you look at the Bama game last year, you look at the LSU game. I mean, they had some moments. It just didn't work out. And is neck and neck as we're anticipating a lot of these ball games being in the fall. If they don't have a guy, that is a grave concern to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's just goes back to the experience thing. But that's kind of, if they feel like they need to look to the spring portal window, they'll have that opportunity to see what they can find. And they've got options on the roster right now. But I'm interested to see what happens there from a portal standpoint.
All right. Anything we missed?
I don't think so. I think we covered every spot football wise, and basketball portal that continues to ramp up, and we'll see. They've got those guys in right now officially signed, but it's crazy time right now with the portal window open. It's an important time for the men's team as well, and then all the other sports you got going. You got softball with a top 10 matchup this weekend, baseball looking to get back on track, so it should be a pretty fun weekend overall.
Yeah, I was going to see if any latest news from the basketball portal. I know you and Matt covered it pretty good last night, but not hearing anything other than what we had on the late night show.
Yeah, not much. I think the number one priority right now is finding that point guard. I think that's the one where that's really when you came into the transfer portal cycle, that was still the number one overall target, just seeing what went down last year. But that's going to be interesting these next few days to track to see who they're looking at or who they end up getting.
Do the ladies win the national championship? There's only one correct answer to this, AJ.
I say they do.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's good. Don't make me come through and beat you up.
They'll let you back in next year.
Yeah. That's right. Alex, great report, man. What's on the lunch table today?
I'm not sure. I got to see what I can find because
we could help you here. It's National Burrito Day.
Okay. Or D's Wings, sponsor of the show as well. I mean, can't go wrong with D's Wings. Like, I'm getting hungry sitting here talking about it. I need to figure out what I need to do.
Let's see. Does D's
AB could point you in the directions of some pretty creatively assembled burritos here.
Yeah. Would you like a donut burrito?
I would love to try it.
Really?
Yeah, it sounds intriguing.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes when I try it, but we'll see what can happen.
What are your feelings on a sushi burrito, Alex? Is that?
I don't know about that one.
No, you're not sure. Okay.
I'm not sure about the sushi burrito. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. D's doesn't have any. They have wraps, but they don't have burritos. I don't really know what the difference in a wrap and a burrito is anymore. Everything's so blended together.
Semantics.
Well, if you venture out, maybe go grab your favorite burrito. Moe's knows burritos.
Moe's is very good. Yeah.
Welcome to Moe's. Do they still do that? Welcome to Moe's.
I think so. Yeah.
I haven't been in there in a while.
Oh, they get the one. There's a lot of kids that work in the one nearest me, and you might get a half-hearted welcome to Moe's.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, welcome to Moe's.
What is more energizing? Yeah. What is more energizing to the two of you? Welcome to Moe's, or my pleasure.
Oh man,
I'm more offended if I don't get a my pleasure,
right,
than I am if I'm not greeted with a good welcome to Moe's.
Do you start worrying about the food, Phil, if you don't get a my pleasure?
I do question things. Like, I might be more inclined to check the bag if I don't get a my pleasure.
Oh, no way. I've never been to Chick-fil-A ever and had an issue with my order.
No.
One time, but that's it.
Well, that poor kid probably got fired.
I didn't bring it up because I was worried like they might have done bad things to the guy who
put him in the
packed my order. I'm like, man, dude, I'm not going to tell on you. It's okay. I'll eat it because it's got pickles on it. But yeah, I'll just pull them off because I don't want you to have to, suffer for this.
Yeah, it puts you in Chick-fil-A jail if you screw up an order. I mean, they dock pay and the whole 9 yards. But leave of absence. So whatever happened to Jerry?
Who?
Jerry's on he's on a leave of absence. Oh, what happened? He left the pickles on. Oh,
yeah, that's right.
Pickle guys, though, that's the toughest position at the window, man. All right, Alex, we'll let you get out of here on that note, man. We really appreciate the time, as always. And there is no media, I don't think, for the scrimmage on Saturday, so we'll just have to go on hearsay. So
right. Yep.
Yeah, whatever they tell us, we'll just have to believe it. We'll take your word for it, Shane. Whatever.
Yeah, that's all right. You and Hale go down there, sit on his shoulders, and see what we can see. And
I can tell you how to get into that ballpark without having to be let in. It has happened before.
I told you all fair.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's right. We'll take that all fair.
Enjoy a good burrito today, Alex.
Yeah, man.
See y'all next time.
Thanks, buddy.